Hello, I'm James Zimoha and you're watching A News. Let's see your headlines. EU unveils major defense projects to counter drones and secure eastern border. French Prime Minister survives no-confidence votes after making pension concession. Trump says he has authorized covert CIA action in Venezuela. The European Commission has proposed 4 European flagship defense projects, including a counter-drone system and a plan to fortify the eastern border as part of a drive to boost defenses by the end of the decade. Speaking on the plans, EU's foreign policy chief, Kai Kallas, said it's clear Europe needs to toughen its defenses against Russia, adding that the danger will not disappear even when the war in Ukraine ends. 2 of the proposals concerning the so-called drone wall and the fortification of EU's eastern borders are slated to have initial capacity by the end of next year. The proposals are subject to the approval of the EU's 27. In Europe, talk of a drone wall is turning into one of the continent's most ambitious defense projects in decades. The idea gained ground after a Russian drone incursion into Polish airspace last month, an incident that exposed just how vulnerable Europe could be to aerial threats.
Europe is planning a high-tech drone wall, a new defense system designed to protect the continent from low-cost but dangerous drone attacks. The idea became urgent after more than 20 Russian drones entered Poland last month, shutting airports and forcing NATO jets to scramble. Warsaw says the attack was deliberate, showing that Europe's skies are vulnerable to modern drone warfare. So, what is the drone wall? It's not a physical barrier, but a network of technology. Radars to detect drones, jammers to disrupt them, interceptor drones to stop them, missiles for high-risk targets, and electronic systems to track threats in real time. All these layers will work together 24/7, creating a shield that can respond quickly to drones before they reach cities, airports, or critical infrastructure.
The drone wall is, of course, in its early stages, but the Baltic states are very keen on this, so stretching down through the Baltics, Poland, Germany is also within range of a lot of these Russian drones, and it's about integrating all of your air defense assets to work together in tandem, from ground radars, fighter jets, cheap interceptor drones, missiles, the whole range of capabilities and electronic warfare to jam these drones, all working in tandem around the clock. It's quite a challenge.
Europe wants the drone wall to be fully operational by 2027. It's part of a bigger project called the Eastern Flank Watch, which also includes an air defense shield and a defense space shield. The aim is to give Europe more control over its own security, especially as NATO and US support is no longer guaranteed. The project started with the Baltic and Nordic countries, but recent incursions in Denmark and Germany have pushed the EU to create a network covering the whole continent. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte says the plan is timely and necessary, warning that Europe cannot keep spending millions of euros shooting down drones that cost only a few $1,000s each.
The big challenge for the drone wall is to shoot these drones down or take them down with electronic warfare in a cost-effective way. You just can't be firing hundreds or even thousands of $1 million or $500,000 missiles at these drones that generally cost about $50,000 each. It's hard to put a firm price on these things. It's always changing, but that would not be sustainable from an industrial-based perspective or a cost perspective. That would be the Russians imposing a huge cost on us. So the challenge is to get the technologies, cheap interceptor drones, get the costs down.
If successful, the drone wall will stretch from the Baltic to the Black Sea, forming a layered shield across Europe's eastern flank. It could protect airports, energy sites, cities and military bases. showing that Europe is ready to face the new realities of modern warfare.
NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte said the alliance plans to step up and accelerate its efforts to strengthen counter-drone capabilities following a meeting of defense ministers in Brussels. Rutte stressed that NATO and the European Union are working closely together with no overlap in their activities. The ministers also discussed ways to enhance support for Ukraine and to bolster border defense amid the growing number of Russian drone attacks across Europe.
Which also discussed our deterrence and defense posture and some of the ways in which we are innovating to deal with new and novel challenges, including those posed by drones. As a result, NATO will implement a number of additional counter-drone measures that will build on and expand and accelerate our ability to counter drones. Earlier this month, 9 allies came together along with Ukraine to support Denmark's ability to counter potential drone threats. I think this is a powerful example of the quick and effective cooperation that is made possible through NATO. As we speak, in the context of Eastern Sentry, we are testing integrated systems that will help us detect, track and neutralize aerial threats. Innovation and adaptation are in this alliance's DNA. In this vein, we will continue to learn from and cooperate with Ukraine, speed up our own innovation, deepen cooperation with the private sector and more.
German Chancellor Friedrich Merz said he would call for the European Union to use frozen Russian assets to back a €140 billion loan for Ukraine to finance its war efforts at the upcoming EU summit. He made this statement during his address to the lower house of parliament, the Bundestag. Merz first proposed an interest-free EU loan backed by these assets in September in the government declaration. He also addressed developments in the Middle East, European defense, competitiveness and migration. Britain is tightening its sanctions on Russia, this time hitting major oil firms and tankers linked to Moscow's war funding. Officials say the move is meant to increase pressure on Moscow and limit its ability to sustain the war in Ukraine.
Britain has announced a fresh wave of sanctions against Russia, this time targeting two of its biggest oil giants, Lukoil and Rosneft, as well as dozens of tankers in Moscow's so-called shadow fleet. The UK government says the measures are part of efforts to tighten energy sanctions and choke off the Kremlin's war revenues. Both Lukoil and Rosneft have been placed under Britain's Russia sanctions laws for what officials describe as their role in supporting the Russian government. The companies now face asset freezes, director bans, transport restrictions and a prohibition on British trust services. London says the two firms are strategically important to the Kremlin and play a key role in generating state income that helps fund the war in Ukraine. The new package also targets 51 ships, including 44 tankers, identified as part of the shadow fleet, as well as several individuals and entities across the energy and defense sectors. But London has made one notable exception. Energy projects in Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan that involve Russian oil firms are now exempt from these sanctions. The government says their aim is to protect international partnerships and ensure energy stability in the Caspian region. Finance Minister Rachel Reeves said there is no place for Russia in global markets, adding that Britain will take every possible step to stop Moscow from financing its war. She also warned that the UK is stepping up pressure on companies in other countries such as India and China that continue to handle Russian oil. Russia's embassy in London dismissed the measures, warning they would backfire by destabilizing global energy markets and raising costs for British businesses and consumers. Rosneft is Russia's largest oil producer, responsible for around 40% of the country's total output, while Lukoil ranks second and has the broadest international presence. The UK government says the sanctions could restrict access to shipping and insurance services for Russian oil, which is still being moved through British-linked firms. But traders say the move may push more of Russia's Russia's exports into the Shadow Fleet, a network of over 1,500 vessels using non-Western insurance and opaque ownership structures to evade sanctions. Western allies, including the US and the EU, have increasingly targeting these fleets since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. Zeina Ferarzadeh, News, Manchester, United Kingdom.
Now to France. French Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu has survived 2 no-confidence votes. Lecornu won the first motion by 18 votes and survived the second by a larger majority. Even though this is good news for Lecornu and President Emmanuel Macron, who appointed him in September, Lecornu is still on fragile ground with the aim to get a 2026 budget through Parliament before the end of the year. He narrowly won after his pledge to suspend the 2023 pension reform got him the support he needed. Under the US-brokered Gaza peace plan, Hamas has so far released all 20 surviving Israeli hostages and returned only 7 out of the 28 deceased. However, it was confirmed that one of the bodies released was not one of the hostages.
Mourners gathered at a cemetery in Jerusalem to bid farewell to slain Israeli hostage Daniel Shimon Peres, whose body was returned by Hamas earlier this week as part of a US-brokered deal to end the Gaza war. Israel says 2 bodies believed to be hostages also have been handed over through the Red Cross on Wednesday, though official identification is still pending. Under the US-brokered Gaza peace plan, Hamas has so far released all 20 living hostages, but returned only 7 of 28 dead captives. Another body handed over earlier this week was later confirmed not to be one of the hostages.
We stand clear when we say this. Hamas, the terror organization, is required to uphold its commitments to the mediators and return all of our hostages as part of the implementation of this agreement. We will not compromise on this, and we will spare no effort until our fallen hostages return, every last one of them. Hamas agreed to release all 48 of our hostages in phase 1 and made the specific confirmation to President Trump, and we are expecting to see the terror organization uphold their side of this agreement.
Hamas says it needs time and specialized equipment to recover the rest of the deceased from the ruins of Gaza. The group's armed wing said in a statement it was committed to the deal and had returned all the bodies of hostages it was able to reach. Israel's defense minister warned that fighting may resume if Hamas fails to uphold the deal, a sentiment echoed by US President Trump.
Tens of thousands of Gazans with serious injuries and diseases are waiting for medical evacuation as the Rafah border crossing is set to reopen. Families are hoping the move will finally bring urgent treatment that the local health system cannot provide.
After months of war and blockade, families in Gaza are clinging to hope that the reopening of the Rafah border crossing will finally bring life-saving medical help. 18-year-old Hassan was shot in the head more than 2 months ago while searching for food. The injury caused a brain hemorrhage, forcing doctors to remove part of his skull.
If the crossing doesn't open and he can't go abroad for treatment, Hassan, a young man in the prime of his youth, 18 years old, I'll lose him. Hassan, for 18 years I have raised him, run after him, fed him, and given him drink, done everything so he could grow up. But now, as you can see, his condition, Hassan needs treatment outside. If he doesn't get out for treatment, I'll lose him completely.
According to the World Health Organization, Hassan is one of 15,600 Gazans waiting for medical evacuation, including 3,800 children. Many are war-injured, while others suffer from cancer and heart disease amid Gaza's collapsing health system. Israeli officials said the Rafah crossing, used for patient transfers through Egypt, will reopen soon.
I am waiting for the Rafah border crossing to open. I've been holding a medical referral for more than a year with this referral. I was injured in the war on May 11th, and until now, I've been in the hospital waiting for the Rafah crossing to open. My condition is actually getting worse every day.
World Health Organization said hundreds have already died waiting, including 740 people and 137 children since July.
For now, I'm waiting for the crossings to open according to the referral. I'm working on a referral for my son. His tendons are torn and his nerve is severed. And 2, he has an amputation in his left leg. God willing, the crossings will open.
Since the conflict began, over 7,000 patients have been evacuated, with Egypt taking more than half. Transfers slowed sharply after Rafah was shut in May last year when Israel took control. Since March, fewer than 4 patients a day have been allowed to leave, a rate that would take over 10 years to clear the waiting list, WHO data shows.
Tensions are rising in Latin America after President Trump confirmed CIA operations in Venezuela, drawing strong condemnation from Caracas as well as warnings from Colombia. Trump says it's about stopping drugs and illegal migration, but it has left leaders alarmed and the region on edge.
US President Donald Trump has confirmed he's authorized the CIA to carry out secret operations in Venezuela, a move he says is aimed at tackling drug trafficking and illegal migration.
And the way you look at it is every boat that we knock out, we save 25,000 American lives. So every time you see a boat and you feel badly, you say, wow, that's rough. It is rough, but if you lose 3 people and save 25,000 people, these are people that are killing our population. Every boat is saving 25,000 lives, and you can see it. The boats get hit, and you see that fentanyl all over the ocean. It's like floating in bags. It's all over the place, and it's a tremendous. We're saving tremendous amounts of lives.
Trump says the focus is now shifting to land operations and accused Venezuela of sending prisoners and people from mental institutions into the US, saying the move was to protect American lives, but did not confirm if Maduro was a target.
And is there...
In response, President Nicolas Maduro condemned what he called US aggression, urging Trump to choose peace over war. Venezuela's government formally protested the decision, calling it a serious violation of international law.
Listen to me. Not war, yes, peace. The people United States, from the people Bolivarian Republic.
Foreign Minister Ivan Gil said Caracas viewed the move with deep alarm, claiming it was part of a push for regime change aimed at seizing Venezuela's oil wealth. The country plans to raise the issue at the United Nations and with regional leaders. The Trump's announcement has sparked alarm across Latin America. Colombian President Gustavo Petro warned that any US military or intelligence operation in neighboring Venezuela could have grave consequences for regional stability.
Honestly, I'm not much of a fan of the policies pursued by the current government of Venezuela because I did not recognize it. I won't get into that. But I do know what can happen in Colombia, and that is my responsibility if missiles start falling over there, or, as announced today, if a violent operation begins by land carried out by CIA agents, they say, or by US Marines, or, as we already know, if missiles are launched at an unarmed civilian population, whether or not it is part of the drug trafficking chain, because that would run counter to the United Nations Human Rights Commission's resolution, which unanimously approved the Colombian resolution.
The move has heightened tensions in the region, leaving uncertainty over how tensions between the US and Venezuela will unfold.
Global carbon dioxide levels have just reached a record high, pushing the planet closer to the edge. Scientists say that every molecule we emit hits up the atmosphere, fueling extreme weather, droughts and wildfires.
Carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere have reached their highest ever recorded. So too do fresh concerns over accelerating global warming and extreme climate events. According to a new report from the World Meteorological Organization, the global average concentration of CO2 rose by 3.5 parts per million between 2023 and 2024, the largest increase since modern measurements began in 1957. The report comes ahead of next month's United Nations Climate Change Conference in Brazil. Scientists say the rise is largely driven by the burning of fossil fuels and a surge in wildfires, particularly across South America.
Every single molecule which is emitted in the atmosphere will have a global impact. And I usually use a pretty simple comparison that if you can imagine the CO2 molecule as a small heater, which is actually absorbing the infrared radiation or heat from the Earth's surface and then flies in the atmosphere and re-emits this heat back into the atmosphere, that causes an increased heating. So the more molecules we have, the stronger is the impact on climate.
While about half of carbon emissions are absorbed by forests, land and oceans, these natural carbon sinks are under increasing stress. Rising temperatures and prolonged droughts are reducing their ability to offset human emissions.
The areas of the Amazon which are deforested, the largest deforested areas, they are, for the last 10 years when we have the analysis, they are emitting more CO2 than they are absorbing. So the common notion that if you have a forest, it should absorb, it actually needs to be corrected in a sense that it's a living thing, and it's super alerting. Because you can imagine, as I said, the forests are taking up 25% of human emissions. If you have no forest or the forest is stressed, then there is no uptake plus the forest respiration. We need to be very concerned with those climate feedbacks.
Experts warn that recent climate trends signal the weakening of the planet's natural defences and a future that may bear the cost of human inaction.
Welcome back to A News. As tensions persist on Europe's eastern flank, NATO and the EU are ramping up efforts to counter growing drone threats from Russia. To discuss the implications, we are joined by political analyst Diogo Castro Silva from Sao Paulo, Brazil. Thank you very much for joining us, sir.
Hi there.
Now, what does the EU's new drone defense plan tell us about Europe's evolving security priorities?
Well, there is some good news, obviously, regarding identifying the question of security and more specifically, for example, the question of drones as a priority for Europe. There are two other pillars that I think are still missing. The first one is that Europe, and probably in coordination with NATO, has to identify how to deter Russia, not only by resilience, which is what is being advocated, meaning being more resilient to this kind of incursions, but how can you deter in a proactive way Russia? What can you do to deter Russia? It can be in other realms other than the specific, for example, drone incursions in Russia. The second pillar, which has to be understood, is the integration of Ukraine into the European defense, because the country that has most experience, for example, with drone warfare at this stage in Europe is Ukraine.
Now, how does NATO's Eastern Sentry initiative fit into the broader push to strengthen air and drone defenses?
Well, Eastern Sentry is kind of a traditional, when I mean traditional, is the kind of typical policy or posture that NATO would have towards a conventional threat. What is challenging is the question of the drones, which put an equation, I mean, it's not sustainable for fighter jets being used to shoot drones when each missile and each hour of operation of a fighter jet is multiple times higher than the cost of the drone that can be shot down. So this is where I mean that also at the level of NATO, the conscience that we have to change approach, and together with the EU and with this different posture of the US, let's see if that materializes, we can deter Russia in a more proactive way, meaning really signaling the cost of Russia doing these incursions. Because just on the passive mode as we have been, we only invite further Russia escalation.
Now, the EU's plan aims to be fully operational by 2026. How realistic is that timeline, given member states' different views?
Well, for example, what was spoken about the drone wall, in a sense, for example, is dependent upon what is happening in some elections, like in Hungary, which will be next year. I think that is more an aspirational objective, and talking about drone wall is kind of catchy, but I think what we have to have is capabilities and capacity to really make sure that critical infrastructure in Europe is safe. And like I told before, more than having specific names for what we want to do, we need to be very clear-eyed on the kind of messages we want to pass to Russia, because obviously what we imagine as a drone wall will not be ready into 2026. What needs to be done to 2026 is really identifying how can we have a policy, a security policy towards Russia that can deter this hybrid low threshold kind of hybrid conflict that we are facing.
Now, Mark Rutte stressed there is no overlap between NATO and EU efforts. Do you see effective coordination, or could competition emerge?
Well, I don't see competition. What I see is a problem in what is the role of the United States. There has been evolution in terms of the rhetoric, which in rhetorical terms has improved, I would say, from the low point, which was the Zelensky visit to Washington in the beginning of the year, and especially after the kind of failed Alaska summit. We see improvements in rhetoric, we see improvements like some newspapers reported on the intelligence sharing, but there needs to be a further evolution in terms of NATO, in terms of what is the posture of NATO, what is the role of Europe, is the US really wanting to disengage, or we can have the US as a reliable partner so that both the pillars of the EU and the pillars of NATO can complement each other. This is a matter for political, at the political level rather than the military to start with. But I see there is some room to improve how both institutions can work together. And lastly, in terms of the EU, is member states also what they want to delegate at the federal level or at the federal level, and what they want to remain at the national level. So a debate in the context of the EU.
Now, with winter approaching and Russian strikes intensifying against Ukraine's energy grid, how crucial is drone defense to Kyiv's resilience?
Critical. And I would say there has been evolutions in that sense. There is a lot of technological evolution in terms of Ukraine being able to shoot down drones. For example, what has been happening more recently is not at where strikes have been being heavier on Ukraine's energy sector, is not so much on the drone level, is on the missile level, where Russians have involved their operational capabilities in terms of bypassing air defenses like Patriot and other. And so this is an arms race in terms of the defender and the attacker. And Ukraine is also trying to deter from this kind of attacks by attacking itself in Russia. So again, it costs to the attacking party, in this case Russia, that if it attacks further, it will also suffer damages into its energy infrastructure, into its oil refinery capacity. So the Ukraine has adopted also a more proactive strategy in terms of striking Russia, and in terms of, and this is why this dialogue about US not only sharing intelligence, which is absolutely critical, but also some additional capabilities is one of the most important routes to deter Russia from this kind of attacks.
Now, beyond immediate military needs, could this renewed focus on drone defense reshape Europe's defense industry and strategic autonomy?
Absolutely. One of the things we have to see Europe in this case as a little bit of a latecomer into the game. And the advantage of the latecomer is that it can absorb more recent lessons, has less legacy burden. So in this case, Europe, in this rearmament, can bypass some of the legacy systems and doctrine that have been a staple in Europe, in all Western countries, and really incorporate the lessons of the invasion of Russia into Ukraine, into upgrading its capacities. Because the drone warfare, and this is also important for people that are watching, is probably the most important revolution in military warfare since the Blitzkrieg in the late 1930s that was successfully executed by Germany, which basically was using tanks, and tanks had already existed before in the First World War, but in a different way. Likewise, drones had already existed for many years, but how they are being used, its prevalence and its numbers in the battlefield, and the transparency it provides in the battlefield, and the vulnerability that, like for example, logistics and other parts of the military have in terms of being vulnerable to drone attacks, is a total game changer. So this is why aiding Ukraine to defend itself against Russia is not only it's critical to European security in terms of not rewarding Russian aggression, but it is also critical because Ukraine is today the most advanced military in terms of understanding the incorporation of drones into conventional military. And if that, for example, in the extreme case, if that capacity would fall in Russian hands, it would completely destroy European security. So this is why the role of Ukraine is not only as beneficiary of aid, but Ukraine has a lot to give to European security in terms of its knowledge and capacity of this new kind of warfare.
Mr. Diogo, thank you very much for sharing your time and insights with us.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Welcome back to A News. The third Azerbaijan National Urban Forum is underway in Kankendi, bringing together experts, officials, and urban planners to tackle the challenges of building sustainable and inclusive cities. Today's discussions range from strengthening urban-rural connections to making housing more affordable, with insights from Azerbaijan, Turkey, and China. Our correspondent has more.
The second day of the third Azerbaijan National Urban Forum is underway in Hankendi. Today's program features 6 thematic panel sessions focused on practical solutions for building sustainable and inclusive cities. The day began with discussion on urban-rural linkages, exploring how balanced development can support social and economic growth. Speakers included Nigar Arpadarai, Member of Parliament and COP29 high-level champion, and Katya Schaefer, Inter-Regional Advisor on UN Habitat. Housing affordability was another key topic. Officials from Turkey, China and Azerbaijan shared their country's experience in making quality housing accessible through innovative finance mechanisms and public-private partnerships. Later today, discussions will turn to mobility, data and urban health, from smarter transport planning to designing cities that support people's well-being, safety and inclusivity. Tomorrow, the forum continues in Baku, where sessions will focus on climate resilience and innovation in urban development. Sabina Abubekirova, A News.
Russian and Syrian officials held talks in Moscow on Wednesday to explore energy cooperation, including potential oil projects in Syria. That's according to Russian Deputy Prime Minister Alexander Novak. Novak said Syria is facing a severe shortage of oil as it seeks to rebuild its economy and infrastructure after years of conflict. He noted that Russian companies have long been active in Syrian oil fields. The discussions took place during interim President al-Shara's visit to Moscow, where he also met with President Putin. The Turkey-Africa Business and Economic Forum has begun in Istanbul. The event is organized by the Ministry of Trade, the African Union and the Foreign Economic Relations Board. This year's forum focuses on strengthening Turkey-Africa relations and sharing mutual gains, with discussions covering agriculture, energy, construction and digital technologies. Over the 2 days forum, panel sessions and country presentations will take place. Presidents from Turkey and Angola are expected to participate as the forum concludes tomorrow. Search and rescue teams from Turkey's Disaster Management Authority departed for Gaza as part of the ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas. According to senior officials, Ankara will take part in a joint task force alongside Israel, the United States, Qatar and Egypt, established to locate the bodies of deceased hostages in Gaza, whose locations are unknown. Azerbaijan, Indonesia and Pakistan have emerged as the leading candidates to contribute troops to a possible international stabilization force in Gaza. That's according to U.S. defense officials' political reports. The plan outlined in President Trump's 20-point peace proposal for Gaza calls for a temporary multinational force to help train and support vetted Palestinian police units. Officials say these 3 nations have shown the most interest so far. Washington has stressed that no American troops will be deployed inside Gaza. President Erdogan has announced that electricity production at the Akkuyu nuclear power plant will start in the near future. He added that other nuclear projects are also underway, and despite opposition criticism, Turkey will continue to invest in nuclear energy. Earlier, Energy Minister Alparslan Bayraktar stated that the first of the plant's 4 reactors is planned to become operational in 2026. Afghanistan's foreign minister has wrapped up his week-long visit to India, a trip seen as both a diplomatic milestone and a geopolitical balancing act amid rising tensions with Pakistan. Our correspondent Tamim Bahis has more.
The 7-day visit saw the Afghan foreign minister meeting Indian officials, business leaders and members of the Hindu and Sikh communities. Diplomatically, the visit achieved some major breakthroughs. India agreed to reopen its embassy in Kabul and upgrade its mission, a move widely seen as a step toward normalization with the Taliban government. The 2 sides also pledged to expand trade, boost Afghan exports like dry fruits, and make it easier for Afghans to travel to India for medical treatment. New Delhi also promised a deeper cooperation in education, health, and development, further enhancing the Taliban's international legitimacy. But even as the Afghan delegation was in India, tensions with Pakistan flared dramatically. For days, Pakistan and Afghanistan exchanged heavy border fire amid reports of airstrikes. By Wednesday evening, both sides confirmed a ceasefire at 5:30 p.m. local time. A Taliban spokesperson said the truce came at Pakistan's request, while Islamabad called for constructive discussions to ease tensions. The UN has urged both nations to protect civilians after reports of casualties. Analysts say Pakistan's long-standing rivalry with India could complicate Kabul's new outreach to New Delhi. For now, though, Afghanistan is celebrating what it calls a successful diplomatic breakthrough, even as the guns fall silent, at least temporarily, on its southern border. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A News.
Tajikistan has secured investment deals worth over $4 billion at the International Forum Dushanbe Invest 2025. The agreements reflect the country's ongoing efforts to boost economic growth and attract foreign investment.
The International Investment Forum has just concluded in the capital of Tajikistan, where 52 agreements and contracts were signed, totaling more than $4 billion, a record figure for the country. Nearly $500 million of this amount is dedicated to projects related to the development of Dushanbe itself. The remaining investments are directed towards Tajikistan's strategic sectors, including industry, energy, agriculture, transport infrastructure, and tourism. Representatives from foreign governments, international financial institutions, and business leaders from various countries attended the event. Key discussions focused on improving the investment climate and attracting direct foreign investment. A key highlight of the forum was the announcement that Tajikistan aims to become the first country in the CIS to develop lithium production, a crucial component for electric vehicle batteries. Sherali Kabir, Minister of Industry and New Technologies, also pointed out that Tajikistan holds reserves of 10 out of 12 metals critical for the global green transition, 6 of which are already produced domestically. He emphasized the country's intention to actively engage in new supply chains for rare earth metals. Participating in the forum, the deputy mayor of Dushanbe noted that foreign investment in the city reached $2.2 billion in the first half of this year. The capital is actively expanding its international ties, cooperating with 69 countries. This global engagement supports Dushanbe's strong economic growth, with the city's economy expanding at an average rate of 7.3% annually and consistently contributing around 20% to the country's national GDP. The forum also highlighted the importance of 4 major transport corridors crossing Tajikistan, which connect the country's markets with neighboring countries in the wider region, boosting foreign trade to Nova. Fariza Kalimurzina, Almaty, A News.
Well, that's all we have for now. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned to A News.